Let's move on and talk briefly about the crops that you grow and the breeding of them. What needs to change, would you say, John, in the breeding of organic crops?
I think, and actually it's interesting because it's not just organic farmers that are really focusing on these things. It's about looking, and what we need is crops that actually need sort of lower inputs. And so if you're thinking about, herbicides, we need wheat varieties that have great big long draping sort of flag leaf that's, continue to shade weeds all the way up to the time that the year comes out. We need, crops that are going to be able to sort of scavenge for nutrients better. We're undoubtedly going to need some kind of sort of drought tolerance in our crops. And our pulses. I had a fantastic meeting with some plant breeders the other day after I heavily criticised them with, complete ignorance about, why we couldn't just get an immediate fix to chocolate spot, because all these things are terribly complex. And I think that, the difficulty is that, especially with a crop like beans, where actually it's a niche crop, the amount of money that we genuinely need invested in the pre-breeding to get something really different into that genetic pool, actually it's just not going to happen. So I think that, we need to really seriously look at, plant breeding programs in this country and how they're funded, the split between AHDB and PGRO. We need to be, having investment in the whole rotation, just rather in the odd crop. I think, we've got a huge amount of work to do as far as plant breeding is concerned.
What about GE, gene editing and all that?
My position on gene editing is that, I'm just ears open. I mean, if it can offer us something that means that we impact less, we don't do any damage to the environment, and we still are able to produce, affordable, nutritious food, then, we've got to be listening to what's happening. At the moment, I don't think it's got anything for us to use on the farm, but, in the near future, maybe it will. So, let's just see what happens.
Do you share those frustrations about the range of crops you've got?
I do, and I think John highlighted much of this. I think what we're going to need going forward are different things. So actually, climate change is real. We are already seeing that. Not only are we part of the solution, but actually farmers will be the first people impacted on it. We are seeing more floods. We are seeing more droughts, as John said. And the traits we're going to need in future crops will be different. I think also there's some huge potential when we think of farming and food production as the base of the health service. It's the base of nutrition. And actually, I think there's going to be some really exciting opportunities in that area as we look to breed for particular traits when it comes to nutrition. So I get very excited about the opportunities, but I also, I do fear that there's a lack of resources. I also sometimes think we may well need to look back to look forward. I think actually some of the traits of crops of the past, you've got people like Mark Lee over in Shropshire doing lots of work on heritage varieties and elsewhere, which I did some work on a few years ago, which in a very drought stricken year way outperformed any of the modern varieties, because actually they've got deeper rooting, or they've got some trait to them that lets them deal with the current climate. And I think therefore I think there will be big opportunities, but there will also need to be sufficient resource put into it, and ultimately that's not just here, that's also a global issue.
When you say sufficient resource, who's paying? Surely farmers are paying, aren't they?
There needs to be an element of everyone. Ultimately, the farmer will pay. We are the buyer of the seed, and I think there's some interesting discussions. You touched on GE, and I get very excited about the potential for GE. Actually, I think unfortunately people mistake GM and GE. They don't understand the differences. I think there is some huge potential, but there's also discussions that need to be had around the ownership of that, and some of we touched on complex supply chains earlier in terms of food. We also need to look at how some of the supply chains will work on the input side, including the outcomes of GE, for example. But I also think, yes, we do need to invest. Our levy bodies need to invest. Our plant breeders need to invest. We as farmers, I was over in Australia 15, 20 years ago now, I think I was out there, and I met with a group of farmers who were doing their own plant breeding. Now, on huge scale, and it's different to here, and I get all of that. But, we're sat here, we've got, the John Innes Centre not far away. I farm next door to Rothamsted. We've got, some phenomenal resources in this country, the Organic Research Centre and many others. We've got to pull that resource. We've all got to work together. But we do need to accept that it will take some funding, some cash, some money. And we need a profitable industry that is able to invest in that.
But I think you made a good point, Charlotte, about this has got to be sort of also farmers have got to invest in this thing. And we had with the white oats contract that we supply, we have a 50p levy, an extra levy put on top of every single tonne that we sell. They match fund it to try and develop the kind of traits that we want within oats to supply their factory, so it can work more efficiently, but also can produce the sort of the jumbo oats they want to sell to their customer. And actually, if you think about, it's probably quite a contentious one, but if we're really wanting to think long term about how our business is going to develop and survive, is that maybe some of that money that we're losing through BPS should actually bypass some of our farm gates and actually go to plant breeders, because actually if we're thinking long term, we genuinely want to reinvest in plant breeding as far as farmers are concerned. Maybe we should be thinking along those lines, or just engaging with people and actually doing that sort of self-funded levy thing and trying to get some independent research.
But I think we also need to look elsewhere as well, John. There's a danger if we're not careful, and you and I don't do this, but I know some people do, that we've got to find a British solution to it, particularly post-Brexit. We've got to find a British solution. When actually some of the most interesting wheats recently that I've been growing are specifically designed for organic farming in Germany or elsewhere in the world. And I think actually that's where we as farmers have got to work with people elsewhere in the world. Let's not all reinvent the wheel in 6 different places around the planet. Or let's look at where is the climate that we will inherit in 10 years' time? Where is that today? And actually, what are the things that are going on there that we can help speed up, because we'll be the beneficiary of it in years to come?